2025 was a big year for strikes. You're looking at scenes from the teachers' strike in Alberta that began in October when more than 50,000 staff walked off the job. That same month, Canada Post workers went back on strike as part of job action that was suspended in 2024. And it's not just the strikes we're watching, though. It is the changing way the government is responding to them. Here now with more on that is Ian Lee. He's an associate professor at the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Lindsay.
So many strikes this year, it feels like. Let's take a look at a couple of them. Let's start with Canada Post. The two sides say they've reached a tentative agreement. What is the latest?
It looks like they've settled, which is long overdue. It's going to produce some certainty, which is desperately needed in the post office by the customers. They got it seems a pretty decent raise, 6.5%. The bigger picture, though, Lindsay, is it will produce temporary labor peace and certainty, but it does not address the underlying structural problems facing Canada Post, which is the remarkable, profound decline in customer usage of the post office. They've lost about 70% of all the letters they've delivered from the high water mark, and they've lost over 50%. The data suggests it's over 60% of parcels. So they've still got a daunting chore ahead of them to try to win back customers, and of course they're generating losses of over $1 billion a year. This will actually increase the losses facing Canada Post.
So what do you foresee happening next year with Canada Post in 2026?
The Canada Post management has a proposal in to the Government of Canada, which of course is the shareholder and the regulator and the banker of Canada Post, and they will have to approve it. But given Prime Minister Carney's statement that they will not continue to subsidize and bail out Canada Post with billion-dollar bailouts year after year, it suggests that they're going to approve this downsizing, and there's going to be very substantial layoffs at Canada Post, simply because wages and benefits are 75% of the total annual cost expenditures of Canada Post. So the only way you can reduce that deficit in a meaningful way is to reduce headcount.
Another big strike that happened this year was in October. Air Canada flight attendants walked off the job. This was a 3-day strike that affected nearly, 400,000 travelers. Why are strikes that involve the transportation sector particularly concerning?
Lindsay, I've done 2 papers on this, one back in 2012 and one just last year. And nobody had done this, and it was quite surprising because we've seen strikes in the transportation sector all the way back at least to 1950. And nobody had asked the question, how many times has the government intervened? So I went and working with the Library of Parliament Research Branch, which was very helpful. I found that using the latest data, 2024, that the 2025, excuse me, because I added up the latest numbers, the Government of Canada, the Parliament of Canada has intervened, and/or the Government of Canada has intervened 44 times in the transportation sector since 1950 until now. Successive governments, Liberal governments, Conservative governments. Pierre Trudeau, 14 times he legislated striking workers back to work. And so what that told me was that the transportation sector is special. It's unique because we're the second largest country in the world. And so the successive parliaments have said they're not going to tolerate the incredible disruption and massive costs, social costs, to millions and millions of Canadians across this country.
So let's talk about that for a moment, because it wasn't only Air Canada where the government's intervened. We had the Alberta teachers' strike that happened as well, the Canada Post strike. So talk to me a little bit about the effectiveness of this model.
I argued in that paper that we're going to have to revisit the labor code, I think. And this is not about taking away the right to strike. The Supreme Court of Canada has ruled on that. We all know that, 2015 decision. So that's not about taking it away. But when you look comparatively at Canada compared to the other high-income countries, the OECD, we are one of the worst. And not for 1 year, year after year after year. So it suggests there's something in the framework, the Labor Relations Code, compared to other countries, that perhaps allows an excess of strikes. In fact, I looked at the American system, and they have all these cooling off periods built into their labor code, so that every time you break the negotiations break down or you break off discussions, a cooling off period kicks in. And so it cools everything down and ensures that they have far fewer strikes than we do. And this is something we're going to have to look at, because the public won't tolerate, increasingly has a little appetite for essential services, teachers, hospital workers. They're just not going to tolerate this. And so we may have to look at the framework that regulates labor relations in Canada.
We looked into some recent stats from Stats Canada, and they reported that 6.6 million person days were lost to labor disputes. The most recent numbers we could find were from 2023. That was the highest since 1986. Yes. Presumably, we're higher than that now, 2 years later. Yes. Is it just me? I remember commenting a couple months ago. I was like, I just feel like every day I'm talking about another strike. Is that the case? What is driving so many people to hit the picket lines, do you think?
It could be the inflationary period we went through, although, again, we've had a long history of being at the sort of the outlier, if you will, on strikes. But, Lindsay, I want to bring up something else that's really bring this right up to the moment, because I think it's salient, and that is that there's a wide consensus that we have to diversify our economy. And, the public opinion polls, I think, are showing over 70% because of Mr. Trump. We want to become less dependent. The moment we talk about trade diversification, the reality is we're talking moving stuff. It could be potash, it could be trees, timber, it could be canola. We're talking about putting it on railroads or oil into pipelines to get out to the coasts, to put it on ships, to send it over to Europe and Asia, because we ship our stuff to the States. 90% of it goes on trucks, but we cannot send trucks across the Pacific Ocean or the Atlantic Ocean, to state the obvious. That means that if we want to diversify our economy, and there's a wide consensus that we have to do this to become less dependent on the States, we must re-examine not only the labor code, but the transportation sector, because these unwittingly, I'm not accusing anyone of malfeasance, but these strikes and disruptions in the ports and in the railroads and in airlines are harming Canada's ability to diversify and become less dependent on Donald Trump and the U.S.
We'll see what 2026 has in store for us. Ian Lee, I always appreciate your analysis. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lindsay. Thank you.
If you like that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed, where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.